Welcome to the AICPA Town Hall Series, your resource for the latest news and updates on pressing issues facing the accounting profession.
Good afternoon and welcome to the AICPA Town Hall Series. I'm Eric Auskerson, one of your hosts for today. We've got a great program for you. We're going to kick things off with Kelly Greer, who's the lead for Ernst & Young in the U.S. Talk to her about, how she's seen the past year and a half and where things are headed with the firm and with the overall client base. Then Barry Melanson and I are going to give a legislative update and talk about some firm strategies. And then we're going to get into some important business relief and technical updates with Lisa Simpson. Once again, you've got this toolbar at the bottom where you can download the resources, ask questions, and take advantage of this modern webcast platform. So I encourage you to do that. Right now, I'd like to bring up Sue Coffey and Kelly Greer to kick off this first session. So you all know Sue. Sue is the CEO of the Public Accounting Unit for the AICPA. So welcome, Sue and Kelly.
Thanks, Eric, and hello, everyone. It's great to be back. Today, we have Kelly Greer with us. Kelly is EY's U.S. Chair and Managing Partner. She's an incredibly accomplished professional, including being named as one of Fortune's most powerful women in business for several consecutive years now. And Kelly, I think it's been just over a year and a half since I saw you. I think you might have been at one of my last in-person meetings pre-COVID. It's good to see you again. Welcome, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Sue, and it's wonderful to be here. And it's funny to me that I think all of us remember the last in-person meeting that we had and who that meeting was with. It has such a lasting memory. So I agree with you. I think we may have been out in San Francisco at the same time.
Yeah, so true, so true. So Kelly, let's jump in. You've obviously had an amazing career, 30 years with EY in auditing and advisory for some of the firm's largest and most complex clients, and now obviously leading the firm. Tell me, how are these last 17 months for you? Maybe share a little bit about the impact the pandemic had on the firm's direction and growth, and maybe some of the opportunities you gleaned out of all of this.
Absolutely. It's been an extraordinary time, stating the obvious. And I was, I think, fortunate, at least I was a few years into my role, so I wasn't brand new in the U.S. chair role. But nothing, I think, could prepare any of us for sort of the onslaught of crises that we had over the last 16 months. It wasn't just one thing. It wasn't just the pandemic. It wasn't just the recession that ensued from there. It wasn't just the social justice and social injustice and unrest that emerged during that period of time. It was all of those things, and for all intents and purposes, all at once. And so it was, quite an extraordinary time to be leading any organization, or candidly, I think anyone who was leading even a team had a lot of complexity to deal with. Everyone was experiencing this from a very personal perspective, and how that manifests and how people navigated their personal lives and their professional lives was obviously quite complex. And so during the last 16 months, EY, I'm very pleased to say, fared extraordinarily well. We were not prepared for the COVID-19 pandemic per se, but we had been very well prepared for any variety of crises. And so ultimately, when the COVID-19 pandemic arrived on our shores and started to have implications to our business, we were very quickly able to mobilize, bring our people back home, allow them to have the infrastructure, the network support, the connectivity support that they needed to continue to serve their clients. We were already anticipating some of the wellness and healthcare and childcare complexities and benefits that would be required. So we were mobilizing on that as well. And of course, we were extremely focused on how we continue to serve the public interest and our obligation to support capital markets and all the capital markets activity. So we were able to adapt quickly. Our people were incredibly resilient, and couldn't be more proud really of how they all really led through that period of time. There were opportunities, Sue, to your question, that I think have emerged through the pandemic, and that includes not just business opportunities relative to accelerating digital transformation and using technology differently, but also in terms of the work experience and thinking differently about how, where, and when people work, and being able to create a little bit more of a focus around well-being and how productive one can be, not just at the office or at an office site, but in fact, in many respects, you know what, you could be productive almost anywhere. We've proven that in a very real way. So there's a lot of upside, I think, that we take from the last 16 months, in addition to having endured, obviously, a great deal of stress and anxiety associated with it.
So there was a lot of what you said around the firm's talent, the people. And of course, the war for talent is at an all-time high, and thinking about what's going on now and what we're going to see in the future, fewer professionals available, fewer students at universities, a lot of job changing, some people just simply retiring because they've had it. What's your firm doing, and what do you think we can do as a profession to make sure that we're attracting and retaining the best and brightest, but also the most diverse?
It's such a great question. It's such an important question. And maybe I'll answer from the perspective of the profession and then talk about what EY is doing. It is absolutely imperative that we as a profession continue to demonstrate the criticality and the purpose of the work that we do. The work that we do is incredibly important. It is consequential, and it's very meaningful from a developmental perspective as well. So even if you don't end up staying in the profession or at a firm like EY your entire career, the skills you learn, the experiences that you have are unbelievably valuable and broadly applicable in so many other aspects of business. And I think we need to make that story really resonate and come to life, because it's the reason that I've stayed with the firm as long as I have. I have had so many wonderful experiences, and I know that I have benefited a great deal from the diversity of both those experiences, but also the workforce that we've enjoyed at EY. And that's a very powerful story, especially in today's day and age where people are really looking for purpose in the work that they do. They're looking for alignment of their personal values to the organizational values. So I think that we have a phenomenal story to tell, and we could do a better job of telling the story. And I know this is something that my colleagues in the profession share. The Center for Audit Quality governing board is very focused on this. How do we continue to make the incredible value of a career in the profession really come to life? So we're focused on it, and certainly thinking about if there are impediments or dimensions of the pathway to the accounting profession that are standing in the way or are in any way limiting the diversity. We need to be able to blow through those impediments. We've got to be able to transcend those roadblocks. And so that's another thing that we're really focused on, is access and accelerating the access, particularly with a focus on diversity. We're doing all of those things and more at EY. We are very focused on, again, really thinking holistically about a whole of life experience, about the ability to continue to do many different things using your accounting experiences and skills and career within EY. We have a wide range of opportunities across our multidisciplinary firm model, where people can do a lot of different things and serve so many different clients and participate in so many different sectors. There are very few careers in the world, really, and that allow you that breadth of opportunity and experience. And we're making sure that we're very explicit about our values and what we stand for, so that people can make a choice to join EY because of that values alignment, in the sense that their purpose is connected to our purpose, and they'll ultimately enjoy great careers, hopefully at EY for a long time, but even if they decide to do something outside of EY.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly, because I know every firm on this call is worried about making sure that they have the talent. So great insights there. Now, very quickly, much of these town halls are focused on what's going on down in Washington, D.C. Obviously, a lot of activity. And I think we're going to experience a few tough years as a profession in all areas of the practice, but particularly in audit and tax. Can you maybe provide us some of your perspectives on that?
Absolutely. I think that it's so important for us to recognize the public interest responsibility that we have. As I said earlier, the profession really is consequential. The work that we do is incredibly important. And the value that we bring to the capital markets is demonstrated by the strength of the US capital markets in particular is paramount. And that value and that imperative to protect the public interest transcends any developments, any regime changes, any leadership changes, any political undercurrents in Washington, D.C. So I think it's important that we continue to stay focused on our purpose, on our mission, on our responsibility, and that we challenge ourselves every day to continue to raise our own bar in executing high quality audit work, for example, and that we really are the stewards of support and quality related to the capital markets. So I think our work really needs to transcend what's happening in Washington, D.C. in any given year. And this is certainly going to be one of those years where it's all about us focusing on the purpose, the mission of our work, and continuing to serve the public interests to the highest standards.
Thank you, Kelly. So just to wrap it up, let's just do real quick rapid fire. I know you are a huge baseball fan and you're from Chicago, originally from Chicago. Cubs or White Sox?
White Sox.
Oh, and now you're in New York, right?
I split my time between New York and Chicago, and I've actually been back on the road, and that's been nice, actually, getting out to see the EY folks and our clients. But yes, I split my time between New York and Chicago, but I'm a diehard Sox fan.
Okay, so but being half of the time in New York, you have to pick Mets or Yankees.
Can I take a pass?
You can take a pass on that, but you have to get back to me.
Okay.
And then lastly, pizza style, Chicago or New York?
Oh gosh, I'm going to get in trouble for this one, but New York.
Kelly, thank you so much for being here with us today. This was great, incredibly informative. Love your insights and perspective. Thank you for your time. And Eric and Barry, back to you.
Thanks for having me. Thank you, Sue.
Kelly, thank you so much for being with us. And I think I'm a huge baseball fan too. And for our participants, Kelly really spent a lot of her early career internship working in baseball before going to EY. So it's not just a love for the sport. It really sort of was a big part of your formation and actually your love for accounting through that process. If that's not, that's correct, right?
It's a great memory, Barry. Absolutely. Yes. My formative years as an intern, in fact, were in baseball, and that's ultimately the pathway to EY and the Chicago White Sox, my home team. That's right.
We're gonna give you that pass on picking one of the New York teams. I do want to say for all the listeners, though, Kelly's message about purpose and mission was just right on, and really there's so many smaller firms, smaller businesses on this broadcast. We've been talking about that throughout this COVID environment. It's different. The larger firms are really making sure that our capital market systems remain the best in the world and delivering on that mission. And smaller firms are really key to helping small businesses survive in this incredibly difficult time. And I think the profession on both ends of that spectrum have done a fabulous job. So, Kelly, thank you for your leadership.
And Kelly, I'll just tell you, it's a live event, and we've gotten a lot of positive comments on your remarks. Look forward to having you back again on the town hall. So thanks for participating, and we'll be in touch.
Terrific. Thanks, everyone. Be well.
Bye, Kelly.
Okay, Barry. Well, we've got I liked Kelly's comments about DC. You got to transcend the regime changes and maybe the discussion of the day, but we're going to get into some of those discussions of the day, understanding that our overall purpose is even greater than just any one of these bills. But right now, and I'll just tell you some of the questions coming in, ERC, so it's the final bullet here, and we're going to be talking more about ERC with Lisa. So there's a lot of appetite to understand what's going on with the employee retention credit. But let's start off and just you're very close to this with the great AICPA advocacy team, talking about where these different infrastructure and tax proposals stand. It seems like there's a lot of posturing going on right now.
Yeah, and I think the message is really a bit of patience here, and not to get hung up in the headlines that play out. For instance, on the infrastructure bill, it's just one piece of the puzzle, and Majority Leader Senator Schumer from New York, brought a vote, which was largely a procedural vote yesterday that sort of tested the bipartisan nature of some of these deals, but in a way it really didn't, because the Republicans that voted no really were saying we're voting no because we don't have the detailed text. We don't know what we're actually voting on here. We need to understand what's included and what the so-called pay-fors really look like. So give us the language. And, there's a lot of work being done behind the scenes in Washington to get that language crafted and finalized. And, it's a possibility of another vote on the procedural element even next week. I think it's really important as you talk to your clients, and I know every one of you in public practice, every one of you who is a CFO or in the finance, people are saying, what should we be doing about this tax provision or that? And we've said this before in these town halls. Anyone that knows precise or says they know precisely what that's going to be is at best doing a guess. The reality is there are three major pieces to the puzzle right now. One piece is the infrastructure bill, which there are 20 senators in a bipartisan fashion working to try to get to a bipartisan solution. Then there's a budget bill. This is led by Senator Sanders' committee. It's in the ballpark of a $3.5 trillion budget bill. Now that's critically important because ultimately the tax aspects will come about in something called a reconciliation bill that only requires 50% or 50-50 vote in the Senate, because the vice president will break the tie. So it doesn't take 60 votes, but it has to be reconciliation to a budget bill. And it has limitations on what can be included in that. And that is likely to be where the tax answers or the tax changes will really be. And that's off a little bit. Eric, we talked beforehand, there was a bit of scenarios here that, have been talked about. Is everything going to be smooth in a bipartisan way? That's sort of one scenario. Do the Democrats just go on every one of those three bills, go it alone and try to force their answer? Or what's the real answer that's going to play out? And actually, just a couple of hours ago, Speaker Pelosi made a public statement that sort of made one of those scenarios higher profile, which we call the, Pelosi flexes the muscle for the progressives scenario. And basically, she just said, and this is actually concerning for moderate Democrats in the House, she said, we are not voting in the House until there is a reconciliation bill. So if I just went through those three, that's the third. So a reconciliation bill coming out of the Senate, as she's saying, all three of those before we're voting in the House. Now, maybe she'll change her tune on that as things move along, but that sort of pushes things further back and a higher degree of uncertainty, if that's the position she is taking. And the other part of this, Eric, that I think is very, very important on the tax side and the reconciliation side is that you have the August recess coming, and basically, trying to force some votes or extending when members of Congress are expected to be in Washington can make strange things happen as well, because basically August is a traditional time that Congress goes home. And so there is talk of extending a period of time in Washington, D.C. to see how some of these things can get played out. But I really think it's important to understand the inner workings of all three of those bills.
And as you said, there's a lot going on. I was on the phone with Mark Peterson, and he said, yes, Pelosi just said that, Barry, but if the Senate does pass a bill, maybe they take it up. So it's like every day is a new day. And as you look at the timing here, it's just amazing. Last year, we were talking about the big business relief bills. A lot passed. We thought we started talking about the business relief bill in July, and that bill didn't pass till December. So there's talk that maybe the infrastructure bill, something moves over the next 60 days, and then And then the bigger, the number 2 and 3 parts of your puzzle, that could be end of this year or even go into 2022.
Yeah, most likely in the fall or winter, probably something happens. The more there's discussion and the more it sort of goes down a path, typically things like this get smaller because there's compromise that has to take place. And in fact, there are parts of the House, for instance, that have certain demands on what they expect in tax bill, like repeal of the SALT provisions on itemized deductions. But depending on how this plays out, some of those things might get solved in negotiations just among the Democrats, or it could be in a bipartisan way. It's the proverbial peel back the onion type of notion. It is a layered process. And I think one of the messages that I would say is that helping your clients understand that, even if you just do it, you can take some of these slides that we have here, or just describing it the way that I just described is very important, because you don't necessarily get all of that based on what you hear and see in a 45-second news clip on a television station. And I think that that's important as professionals to really help taxpayers to understand that process.
So Barry, we're gonna move into some firm strategies in a second, but before we do, these two, and we're gonna talk more about ERC, but just what's going on with the IRS services and penalty relief, and what the AICPA is doing around the bill, and also what we're doing related to helping with get some of these ERC questions answered.
Yeah, so let's take IRS services first, which ties into the penalty relief. So this is also an incredible element of the power of our import or input to business owners and what they do when interacting with their members of Congress. If you recall, when we were talking a lot about the relief provisions and even deductibility of PPP, there was a lot of communication from our members who attend these town halls to their clients, and clients were talking to members of Congress. Well, the frustration over the services with the IRS, or maybe the lack of service from the IRS, has evolved further than just the preparer community, and has actually moved into the taxpayer community, business owners and individual taxpayers. And members of Congress are hearing that. They're hearing that loud and clear, not just from us, not just from CPAs, but from that sort of taxpayer community. And as a result, we're getting a lot of outreach from members of Congress saying, what can I do about this? What can I do to help this situation? My constituents are frustrated here. And of course, that is what we want, because we have been making this point for a long time that this service level needs to be addressed. And the first level of that is we need to have rational penalty relief and immediate penalty relief on a lot of these things that have come about because of the trading off of communications, unopened mail, backlogs, et cetera. And we're working with Congress right now to have a bill that actually forces some penalty relief. Now, who knows if that gets passed, or if it gets passed as a standalone bill. But the intensity on addressing the IRS service issue is very great. The other thing that has happened, and it relates to the prior topic, is that I said that, the procedural vote failed because the Republicans wanted to see what the details were. One of those sets of details is what's the pay-fors. Originally in this process, one of the big pay-fors was an estimate of $1 trillion of additional tax revenue if the IRS was funded to get a higher degree of resources to provide better enforcement. And what Congress is sort of saying today, no, we don't necessarily think that's true. Actually, the estimating offices are probably not going to produce that kind of number anyway. But the frustration over the service levels is sort of moving that out of one of the pay-fors. It could come back in the fall, but right now that's moving out of that sort of discussion frame. And so the answer is penalty relief up front, and then service improvement is not an overnight deal. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, but it needs to happen. And I think we need to keep the pressure up that Congress knows this is a particular big problem.
Okay, well, let's Barry, we'll get into a little bit of ERC with Lisa, but let's just to keep things going here. It's something that I know you're talking to firms all the time about, firm strategies. We're going to talk about business relief and where things stand there with the forgiveness program, but also as you think about the ongoing advisory services opportunity, the fact that you've got more opportunity than capacity related to that. and just how you think about the final 4 or 5 months of 2021.
Right. August is going to be a little bit of a lull potentially, although, I mean, your individual staffs will say probably not, but there will be some attempts for people to take time off, et cetera, in this time frame. And I think when, all of a sudden we're going to be in September and, we got, just a few months left. And I think it really is about prioritizing where you go with the firm. How do you prioritize clients' issues? How do you really sort of look at, for instance, in PPP? Is this a 2020 or 2021, for instance, forgiveness? We're going to have Lisa up in a moment to talk about that. So, and really are this war for talent issue that Sue and Kelly talked about. It really is a substantive point right now that firms have an opportunity, maybe the best opportunity we've had in decades, to step back and say, okay, what are the things that my firm is best at? What are the things that our staff can deliver? Where are the strategic needs for our clients who are going to, really compensate us for the services that we're bringing forward? How do we prioritize those buckets? That's not always easy to do, and it's a lot easier to say than do. I know that. But it really is an opportunity to look at strengths, how you partner to get sort of services delivered in another way. Eric and I have been talking about that for a lot of these town halls. But when we look at what's out there, the opportunities that are out there, and the reality of where we are in the calendar and the challenges that are out there, it really is pausing now and doing that process in a very serious way can pay dividends on how you look at by the end of the year.
Well said. Well, Barry, let's bring Lisa up. I mean, she's and her team live the application phase, live in the forgiveness phase. So welcome, Lisa. Let me just make a couple of comments here, and then I know I want you to cover kind of how you're seeing the forgiveness landscape. But this is a great slide that was produced by a broad kind of government oversight group, and it shares where the latest where it stands right now related to forgiveness. If you look at the total PPP applications, almost 12 million applications, 4 million of those have been forgiven, so about 35%. $800 billion is the total PPP program. We had a great discussion with Michael Faulkner on the last town hall related to that. You can see some of the larger, the total dollar amount is almost 50%. So some of the larger applications are getting through, and it gives you some other great stats. The number of jobs retained shows how much payroll was supported. But when I look at this slide, I look at how much more there is to do related to forgiveness. 7 million applications still need to be processed and forgiven. And the numbers are very high. 99% are being forgiven. And there's, Lisa, right now, there's anxiety over the 2020 loans that need to get done because they're going to start owing the principal and interest payments. And then there's also a lot of people that did 2021 loans that want to see their lender portals get active. So maybe I'll just let you kind of jump into the landscape a little bit, then we will bring Barry back in for some perspective on strategies.
Absolutely. Thanks, Eric. So what was interesting on that previous slide is that if you go to that website, it shows that almost 80% of the funds that have been applied for forgiveness already were spent on payroll. So that's a good sign. That's what the program was intended to do. So it's moving. But in terms of the landscape, here's where we are right now. We've been talking about the fact that some loans, some of those 2020 loans are coming due for the period to begin making payments. So we've talked in the past that even if payments have to start, then and then the borrower applies for forgiveness, any overpayment is going to be paid back to the borrower. So I've been asked several times for the reference, and again, I'll call out one of our sharp town hall attendees who sent me the IFR. So I've given you the link there that you can reference. A lot of what's going to happen in the next week or so around forgiveness is going to be around the SBA's plan to what we used to call simplify. Now we know is really just going to be more like a direct forgiveness program. Eric and I have been talking to the SBA and to lenders about it. So we wanted to give you a heads up. There was some stories floating around based on our conversation on the last town hall, but just so you know what may be coming out soon in case your clients hear about it or you start getting emails from your lender or your SBA or the SBA. The SBA is trying to take loans of under of 150,000 or less and go direct to the borrower and push them to a portal so that they can apply for forgiveness directly through the SBA. It'll still go through some processing at the SBA. There is, for second draw borrowers, there's going to be a process where if the reduction in revenues wasn't substantiated at the time of the loan application, it'll be compared to a COVID health score, and borrowers might get a more simplified process around proving that they had economic necessity for the loan. So you're going to hear about that. The words Eric mentioned in our previous call was it might create some confusion in the marketplace. So we want you to know that that's probably going to be coming out in the next week or two. It will probably be used by smaller lenders. It may also be an opportunity for lenders who didn't participate in the second round to get their first round borrowers through the process of applying for forgiveness more easily. So again, it's targeted at loans of 150,000 or less. We're not hearing that there's going to be much change in the process for loans over 150,000, other than what we've talked about in the past about loans of over 2 million. That loan necessity questionnaire is no longer required. We've given you a link to a Journal of Accountancy article there if you want to learn more. We expect that those loans will still be subject to additional review because that's what Congress intended. So we'll see where that goes. But those onerous loan necessity questionnaires will not be required for future loans. Eric, what did I miss on that?
Yeah, I would say, and then we got another slide with a lot of verbiage on it. But what I will say is this: we've said this before. You can assume positive intent. The SBA is trying to put forth a portal that they think will be helpful. The lenders are still the ones that you're going to have to work with your clients with, because the lenders will decide if they use their portal or if they decide to direct these borrowers to the SBA system. So there's no question about it. There's going to be some confusion, even though people are trying to help the 7 million borrowers that have not applied for forgiveness. So I think the larger lenders are going to leverage their portals and their platforms that they've built. And there may be, as Lisa just said, some smaller lenders that decide to leverage the SBA portal. Your clients will ask you questions about this. So I think this is something you'll have to provide them direction. And even more importantly, how does your firm want to, set your practice strategy related to forgiveness? We're going to get into a lot of the technical aspects of forgiveness, but even at a higher level, your engagement letter, your pricing strategy, how you communicate with your clients, how you decide if you're going to take an active role or not take an active role. I was on a call with a firm today, and they said, you know what we're going to do? It's what we do a lot of times. We'll say, we'll help you on the front end for this fixed fee. But if you come back to us in 2 months when there's problems or it's declined, it probably is going to be a higher fee because it's just going to take us more work. So that's good. They're thinking through. This is how I can help you today. And if you come back in 2 months, this is how I think I will help you. So Barry, there's 2 questions for you here. One is, Michael Faulkner talked about, the broad story. You always are talking about the broad story. Keep that in mind when you're thinking about what has occurred. And then also just kind of a little bit of the details that Lisa and I just talked about related to firm strategy.
Yeah. So first on the broad story, and those of you who are regulars here, you've heard me say this. I think the story of this PPP program and the profession's involvement and your personal involvement, if you're on this town hall, is just a message that needs to be delivered. You could take that slide, the 1 2 ago that had the total volume and what's been forgiven and all. What a story. I don't care where you are in the political process. You know, the American taxpayers through our federal government made a huge investment in keeping small business afloat. That's what the PPP program did. And our role as a profession was just incredibly important to that. And if you go back to our original messages about helping people see the light at the end of the tunnel and remaining calm and bringing confidence in the system. And I mean, you could take these 3 slides or maybe that just one slide and do a client seminar, tell your firm's story and tell the profession story, and really the impact that we as a society through our government focused on the small business component and keeping employment going. And I just think that that story has to be told, and the story of your firm's involvement is only going to be told by you. And this is maybe a greatest opportunity ever to do something like that. And it adds to the positive positioning of the profession, frankly. And then the second point, Eric, the sort of the strategy point of looking at it from everything from pricing to, you know, how do you triage, how do you prioritize the clients? I think that absolutely has to be there. You know, there's a 20 versus a 21 issue as a result. Helping clients understand you have some time on the other end that can fit into your cycling. I think it's sort of back my message a while ago. It's about the strategic bucketing of those things and moving the clients to that process. You know, we're pretty good in the tax side. How many of these firms will say, you know, if you don't get your stuff in by X date, we're going to extend your return. That's a pretty common practice in tax. You need to apply some of those types of strategies in this process, still servicing your client, but making it work for what your resources are and where your firm is positioned.
Well said, Barry. We got Lisa. We got lots of questions coming in here. I'm just going to hit 2. One is there's questions out there about a lender, Kabbage, and they're not being responsive. One thing, you know, Biz2Credit, some people are saying, can Biz2Credit help here? Biz2Credit is not responsible for the servicing of Kabbage's loans. I think there was some support provided to them, but this is one of the reasons why the SBA is standing up a direct portal. They know that there's going to be some issues with some lenders. We will take that question back to the SBA. We've had a number of questions have come in about Kabbage, so we'll get back to you on the next town hall related to that. And the other question is, you know, some lenders are saying they still are requiring the loan necessity questionnaire, and we've experienced that. We experienced these types of inconsistencies with the loan application process. So what we encourage you to do is to take, you know, things like the Journal of Accountancy article, the official statements that have come out, and send that to that lender that's still requiring that questionnaire document. Again, what the SBA is trying to do with that portal is trying to standardize, get a common approach. That's what we've always tried to do, drive a common approach. So that's the best advice we have for you is leverage some of this guidance. And that's what I think, Lisa, we got to get into right now, because Lisa's got some great slides related to a lot of the technical aspects. So Barry, we'll bring you back for open forum. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. So if we move into technical, I do want to start with tax and ERC, because we are still waiting on the guidance around how to report PPP as it impacts basis calculations, and then also the ERC push for guidance that Barry mentioned earlier. So I wanted to call your attention to some of the ways we're trying to help. We've got a podcast that's going to be coming out next week from April Walker and Carrie Weston, both of whom have been on town halls in the past. And it's going to be a podcast about how to deal with these difficult situations when, you know, your tax return's coming due, but you still don't have all the answers you need. So that's going to be a great resource for you. And we're also working on some FAQs that are going to be easy for you to point to see, do we have any updates for you yet? And if we have some answers to some tricky questions, then we'll go ahead and try to point those out for you. But if we move on into our other business relief programs, we'll start with PPP. And what I've been doing the last few town halls is going through the steps in the process and then doing a deep dive into a topic each of those weeks. So today, it's our lucky day. We're going to talk about FTEs. And so you've got the guidance links available as you download those slides. So please make sure that you refer to those links, because that's your authority. And let's dig in. What I thought I'd do is I'd start with the form 3508 and look at, on the next slide, the actual reduction calculation, because that's the big question: is a borrower's loan forgiveness amount going to be reduced if there's an FTE reduction? This is complicated. If you just try to follow the words on a page, it's just messy, and you got to wrap your head around it. And then step back and think about intent. So we'll go through some of these steps. But if you start looking at this from the actual worksheet itself, these are the dates that you're going to be looking at. So on the next slide, we'll talk about, we're going to focus on non-seasonal because I can't address all of our situations. But step one, can you bypass that FTE reduction, or can you create a workaround? Legal, of course. But the first way to bypass it is to say, basically, there was no reduction in my number of employees or the average hours they worked between January 1, 2020 and the end of the covered period. That is a very specific time frame. It is not tied to when the pandemic started. It is January 1, 2020 through the end of the covered period. If you got your loan in 2021, then to get that bypass, then you're going to have to say I didn't cut any hours or lay off anyone between January 1 and the end of my 2021 covered period. So that's an important consideration when you're thinking about FTE reduction calculations. Another way just to bypass that FTE reduction calculation, which is going to save you a lot of time, a lot of frustration, and a lot of angst, is can you take that safe harbor around an inability to operate at the same level as before the pandemic? And I've got a slide that'll give you the details on that. We've talked about that safe harbor in the past, so I'm not going to talk about that a lot. But again, you've got the links to the guidance and the messaging that we've been given, which is assume positive intent. Let's go back for just a minute, Eric. So then if you can't get a bypass or a workaround, then what? You've got to start calculating your FTEs. So you're going to compare your FTEs in your covered period to your FTEs in what's called a chosen reference period. Again, these chosen reference periods do not change regardless of whether you got your loan in 2020 or 2021. They do not change regardless of whether you've got a first draw that you're working on forgiveness for or a second draw that you're working on forgiveness for. These dates are baked in to the CARES Act, and they were not updated in the legislation as additional rollout was done. So the one important note is owner employees are not included in your FTE calculations, and that is simply done at the purview of the SBA and the Treasury based on their intent of managing the program. So let's dive into an example that we'll look at on the next slide. This may or may not be related to my favorite TV show, which has its second season debut tomorrow. But anyway, I wanted to give you some calculations that you could look at around how do you actually calculate FTEs. So first it's based on the average hours worked per week during the covered period. So I've done an 8-week covered period, and I've got a person who started during the covered period, wasn't there the full time. I've got someone who quit. And if they were not employed, then that week doesn't go into their average. So you've got some examples there, and you have to calculate this for anyone who worked during the covered period. So you'll also be doing that for anyone who worked in your comparison periods. So if you see Nate, Leslie, and Danny didn't work during the covered period, but they were previously in one of the comparative periods. So we're going to be doing calculations for them as well. So if we go to the next slide, we get lots of questions about what if. What if the borrower doesn't track hours by week? What if the borrower doesn't even track hours at all? What if it's piecemeal? What if it's a salary? What if an employee doesn't have any hours during each week of the covered period? So that's where I was just talking about, Did they quit? Were they not even employed during that week? Were they laid off? If they weren't working during that week, then they're not going to be included in your average calculation. So there are lots of messy questions. The SBA and Treasury have not released any guidance that is going to dive into specific scenarios like this. So I thought we'd just take a step back and think about the intent of the FTE reduction calculation. So you're going to have to use your judgment if your situation isn't cut and dry, and refer to the guidance in that IFR on forgiveness. That's kind of like the single source of truth around forgiveness. But I think it's incredibly important that you just maintain a consistent methodology between all of the covered periods and comparison periods that we're going to talk about. If you just have to make a decision, document it, discuss it with the client. If it is a client, document that discussion, and then maintain your documentation around these calculations. You're not going to get every question answered. You're just going to have to rely on what is the intent of the calculation, which is to determine, did the borrower reduce their headcount or average number of hours worked during the covered period? So then once we've figured out how we're going to calculate our average FTE or our average hours per week, then we have to convert that into an FTE calculation. There are two options. There's an option A and an option B that we'll look at on the next slide. But these are the comparison periods also that you're going to be looking at. So you're going to have to go through at least 3 calculations of average hours per week and then a conversion to FTE if you can't use Safe Harbor 1 or assert that there was no reduction. So as a reminder, Rebecca, in this instance, is an owner. So she is not included in the FTE totals. So yes, I know how to put my Excel schedules, but she's deliberately not included in these totals because she's an owner. So if we go on to the next slide, we'll talk about those 2 options for converting average hours to an FTE. The SBA gave you 2 methods to use. One is probably what you would expect, which is average hours worked divided by 40 hours a week, not to exceed 1. So if you've got employees who regularly work 50 hours a week, 60 hours a week, doesn't matter, there's still 1 FTE. They gave us a simplified method, which is 1 for anyone who works over 40 hours or over, and then 0.5 for anyone who works under 40 hours a week. So what I've done is using our FTE calculator, we have, sorry, I'll scoot a little closer to the mic so y'all can hear me because this is important stuff. So what I've done using our FTE calculator is I've given you 2 examples of how the FTEs would be converted, one using option A and one using option B. So on the next slide, we'll look at how I did the comparisons. And, oh, I'm sorry, Eric, if you could go back for just a second, my bad. So in this one, we've got a comparative period that I'll show you in just a second. So on option A, we had an actual increase in FTEs. So that's fantastic news. That stops our other calculations around FTEs. But using option B, we show up with an FTE reduction calculation. So that's why it's important to use those 2 options, because one could give you a different result. But on the next slide, we'll talk about how to offset some of that FTE reduction if it came up. And one is an FTE reduction exception. So person by person, and the guidance lists out these very specific scenarios in which you are able to basically say, yeah, I had a reduction, but that individual doesn't count because of this. So you've got that laid out there. On the next slide, you'll see that in action. And so you'll see that Jamie actually quit. So it was voluntary, and that takes that out of the exception calculation. So then we'll move into what happens next on the next slide. So we've talked about the safe harbors. The second safe harbor is a restore safe harbor. I think this is really confusing. And if we switch to the next slide, I'll kind of show you why. So these are the steps straight from the forgiveness applications. And what you have to wrap your head around is that your covered period has nothing to do with these calculations. What this is getting at is, did you restore your FTEs to what they were on February 15, 2020, between the period of February 15 and April 26? It's confusing. It makes sense to someone. So on the next slide, I kind of pulled out some of the dates that you'll have to do those comparisons around if you have to go through this restore safe harbor. Again, it's confusing. Just follow the directions. And we do have that built into the FTE calculator. So moving along, I wanted to remind you, we've got these loan forgiveness calculators and the FTE forgiveness calculators on our page. So I'd encourage you to use them.
Yeah, Lisa, I mean, that's a fantastic overview there. And then the lenders too. So, I mean, you're an expert here, and hopefully some of the lenders, I mean, there's going to be discussions with the lenders on how they see some of those different calculations as well. I mean, have you been hearing anything from firms on back and forth with lenders related to the FTE reductions?
Not yet. And hopefully payroll providers are helping your clients with those FTE calculations because they're really messy. All right, quick hit. Restaurant Fund, we had a data release. So if you're interested in that, you can just click on that Journal of Accountancy article and it'll point you to the file. And that platform has closed. We have not heard that there are strong prospects currently for replenishing the fund, but we'll keep you posted. On Shuttered Venue Operator Grant, we got new data on it. So you'll see that there is still plenty of money left, which leads us to the next slide, which is that because there is so much money left in that program, venues may be eligible for a supplemental award. So you've got the details there. There's a link to an article that will help you navigate that if you've got clients that are eligible for that program. And a quick update on Provider Relief Fund questions, because those have been coming in more frequently now that the July 1 reporting period is open. Not going to go through that. I've got the slides there for you. Our good friend Mary Folster will be joining us in a future town hall to give you an update. But on the next slide, I want to point you to some specific resources for your questions around provider relief. So we've got a webcast coming up on the next slide, Eric. So we've got a webcast coming up on August 18. And then we also have a GAQC alert that they've made available to everyone. So that's going to give you some of those good updates that you're after. Lightning round of updates there.
Well, let's bring Barry back up. And Barry, what an amazing, I mean, Lisa packs in a lot of data very concisely and effectively with great communication and great slides. So I've seen from the audience, they really appreciated that review. So we do have questions coming in. Lisa, I'll give you a breath here. I'll tee up the first question for Barry. Barry, one of the topics you covered about the IRS service levels, and the town hall attendees, AICPA members, want to know what should they be doing? Should they reach out to legislators about these issues with the IRS?
Yes, they absolutely should be doing that. They can do that, and also encouraging their clients. But it can be very simple communication, polite and simple complaints to your member of Congress to educate them on the situation. My client had this situation. I got a check. The IRS said send and mail it back. Now I'm getting endless notices, or they're getting endless penalty notices, etc. Those types of very simple to understand service level examples are a good thing to communicate, and have the client do it as well. Hey, I'm an employer in your district is a very important message.
Okay, well, here's another. I'll just take this question. It said banks, had a lending fee. Why are they pushing responsibility to SBA on forgiveness? They're not. The lenders are not. They didn't ask the SBA to do this. The SBA. Everybody, this is a public-private partnership, and the SBA wants to support forgiveness. So the SBA thinks a centralized portal could help. There's 5,500 lenders out there, could help some of the lenders. Lisa and I are on a lot of calls with the lenders. I think that the large lenders are going to continue to leverage their own platforms, and the SBA platform will be more utilized by the smaller lenders. So here's a question for both Lisa, you and Barry, just on ERC. So anything you want to, Barry, we really didn't get to, I know you've been talking to the advocacy team about getting more of these questions answered, and Lisa kind of covered that. So maybe we'll start with you and then let Lisa kind of, comment further.
We are all over that issue. It needs to be answered. There needs to be guidance. It's a program designed by Congress to help people. And we've had a lot of discussions with the IRS as well, and along with some of the other issues on PPP, et cetera, on basis, et cetera. They're just not coming out.
So when, Barry? I'll get more.
There's no when. Look, messages have been imminent. We've been hearing imminent for a couple of months. Okay, so imminent is not. That's not my definition of imminent, and we just continue to put the pressure on, constantly reinforcing the lack of guidance there. It's an example of a service issue.
And Lisa, patience. So the only thing on this is a reason. If it's a 2021 loan, you've got time. So anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, absolutely. If it's a 2021 loan, don't rush forgiveness, but wait until we get the ERC guidance so you can maximize the benefits of both programs. Obviously, if you've got a borrower who's looking to sell and they've got an M&A transaction in the works, they need to get that loan cleared up. Otherwise, they'll have to escrow funds or jump through some other hoops. So it goes back to triage that we started talking about at the beginning of the show.
And that's what we're hearing. We're hearing about, patience, kind of understanding what you need to do and when you need to do it, and manage the process with the clients. Lisa, is there anything that you're seeing that's coming in right now? We've got great attendance out there, 6,000-7,000 attendees. So thank you in July. That's impressive.
No, I'm ready for Engage next week in our special town hall session. So let's talk about that.
All right. So why don't we, bring Barry, you can stay with us as we let's bring the slides back up. Once again, you've got these recent town halls. They're on archive. Yes, leverage them inside your firm. So here's the quick thumbnail of what we've covered over the past 6. And then we've got other learning opportunities here for you to take advantage of. Lisa, anything you want to comment on those?
No, these are all tax related. I just want to give you a reminder about that HHS webcast on August 18th as well.
And as Lisa said, we're now giving you, a little outlook of the next 3 town halls that are coming up. As Lisa just mentioned, we will be doing it live from Engage. You will still log in the same way you log into any town hall if you're not there with us. So what we encourage you to do is take advantage of that calendar invite function. When you're auto registered, you can use the calendar invite, get it on your calendar, because this is going to be Tuesday, 4 p.m. Eastern. Barry, I, and Lisa, and some other guests will be coming to you from Engage. Then the next town hall after that is August 12th, usual time, Thursday at 3 p.m. And then the next one after that is going to be September 2nd at 3 p.m. So we greatly appreciate being with you. We look forward to being with you next week. And thanks for your time. Barry, Lisa, any other sign-off comments from you?
No, but I will say that I interact with a lot of members, and there's a tremendous amount of compliments for this. So Eric, thank you for your leadership. And Lisa, thank you. Your team has done a phenomenal job, and obviously supported by our advocacy team and tax teams. But we get that compliment, and we appreciate that feedback from members. And our team is committed to continue to bring you this up-to-date information.
Well said. And we learn from every one of these sessions, because you guys ask us hundreds of questions. We take those questions, we leverage those questions to give you guidance in the future town hall sessions. So thank you very much. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Barry.
Thank you for your participation. You can now subscribe to the AICPA Town Hall series on your favorite podcast platform. as well as watch archives on YouTube and AICPA TV. Tune in for live broadcasts Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time.